Tonight, coming out swinging.
I am not the president's lawyer. I am not Congress's prosecutor.
The Attorney General faces down the House Judiciary Committee over accusations of political bias in Justice Department investigations. Plus, targeting the leader.
Kevin McCarthy would never put anything above his own power.
GOP drama erupts in the House over an impending government shutdown. And 1 in 7 churches worldwide now face persecution. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The nation's top law enforcement officer testifies before Congress. Thanks for joining us for Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. One former president charged with multiple federal crimes. The current president's son also under indictment. And the Attorney General with a lot of questions to answer.
That's right, Jenna. Attorney General Merrick Garland facing the fire from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle today on Capitol Hill, appearing before the House Judiciary Committee for the first time in nearly 2 years. The GOP-led committee did not waste their opportunity to question Garland about claims of bias at the DOJ. Hillary Powell is on Capitol Hill with tonight's top story. Hillary, a lot of tension in that hearing room, to say the least.
That's right, John. A lot of spicy comebacks from Attorney General Merrick Garland, who is sitting alone face-to-face with some of his most ardent critics. This is a routine oversight hearing, but Republicans are using it as a chance to really hold Garland's feet to the fire and question his leadership in the Justice Department and really ask whether or not the Justice Department under Joe Biden is fair or is it biased. In a high-stakes hearing before the House Judiciary Committee, Republican lawmakers questioned Attorney General Merrick Garland's pledge to remain above politics. Garland was on the defensive.
Our job is not to take orders from the president, from Congress, or from anyone else about who or what to criminally investigate. As the president himself has said, and I reaffirm today, I am not the president's lawyer.
Garland was grilled about his department's handling of probes and prosecutions of former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, on felony gun charges. Special counsel David Weiss leads that investigation.
He picks the one guy he knows will protect Joe Biden.
Democrats on the committee defend the DOJ, noting Donald Trump nominated U.S. Attorney David Weiss.
Your decision was to leave the Trump-appointed attorney completely in charge of this, hands off from you. He makes all the calls without interference from the Attorney General. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The president's son was indicted last week on 3 felony federal gun charges, accused of lying about his drug abuse to buy a handgun in 2018, but questions centered on possible preferential treatment.
They see the DOJ, of course, aggressively prosecuting President Biden's chief political rival, Mr. Trump, while at the same time, they see slow walking and special treatment given to the president's son.
This month, an Associated Press Nork Center poll found just 19% of Americans are very or extremely confident the Justice Department is handling its investigation in a fair and nonpartisan way. Half say they are not too confident or not at all confident. Regent University Robertson School of Government Dean Michelle Bachmann says the FBI should be free from political interference from both sides of the aisle.
They're eager to prosecute those who have political opposition to the current administration. They seem highly reluctant to prosecute anyone who's associated with the current administration. That is a denial of justice.
And Republican Representative Jefferson Van Drew listed a series of incidents where he came questioning really if there was any anti-Catholic bias from the Justice Department. He really targeted in on some FBI memos where he said there was possible anti-Catholic sentiment with some agents going into Catholic churches, perhaps. And to answer that, Garland said that he was actually appalled by any FBI memo mentioning this. He used his chance at the mic to really reaffirm that people practicing their faith should not be seen as extremists.
All right, Hillary Powell reporting. Thank you so much, Hillary.
All right, thank you, Hillary. Also on Capitol Hill, mayhem among the majority party. Republican representatives can't seem to come together on a budget, and now there are 10 days to go until a possible shutdown, government shutdown. The chaos comes as a group of conservative House Republicans push back against the policies of Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
Kevin McCarthy would never put anything above his own power and his own ambition, so he can't even contemplate putting family first. And it showed another reason why he's not just an ineffective leader, but a morally bankrupt one.
On Tuesday, a procedural vote on a stopgap spending measure was canceled over discord among the GOP. McCarthy saying today, though, a shutdown isn't a foregone conclusion.
It's not September 30th. The game is not over, so we continue to work through it. And I've been at this place many times before, and we're going to solve this problem.
All right, now let's bring in CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, always great to see you. So Kevin McCarthy said today that the House will get a continuing resolution done. David, though, it looks like we're getting a civics lesson between what is a majority and a governing majority in the House.
Conservatives, I'm talking about Freedom Caucus members, they don't trust McCarthy. They just don't. And they think he's going to cut a deal with Democrats or moderate Republicans and not get the spending decreases that they want. And that's it's as simple as that. So now the question is, can they concentrate not so much on spending, but on border security, give some of the House Freedom Caucus members some more on border security to make it palatable to them? You know, every time we hear about a government shutdown, I'm always skeptical. This time I'm not. I think there probably will be a government shutdown. I think the House Freedom Caucus is going to dig in their heels, and I'm not convinced that even a continuing resolution will pass at this point.
David, we've seen shutdowns in the past. Will it backfire? Who will this hurt more, the Biden administration, or will it hurt House Republicans?
Well, it's House Republicans that are squabbling over this. So the headlines are going to be about House Republicans can't figure it out in the House. The Senate's ready to pass. The Senate's willing to not have a government shutdown. So as much as the Biden administration is in charge of not just the White House, but the Democrats are in control of the Senate, I think this is probably going to be on House Republicans for sure.
Yeah, David, let's talk about Attorney General Garland and his testimony today. Republicans grilled him on what they call a two-tier system of justice, and then, of course, the Hunter Biden investigation. At the same time, Democrats seem to really write off both of these issues. There was a very clear divide. How did you see today's hearing and the Attorney General's testimony?
Well, I mean, it was what I expected, which is Merrick Garland basically saying, sorry, go ahead and pound sand. I'm not going to tell you a darn thing, that these are investigations that are ongoing and you're not going to get anything from me. And of course, Republicans trying to press him to say, what did you know? What did you know? What did you know? We weren't going to get anything from Garland on that today. What we did get, though, is in essence, Merrick Garland fumbling an answer about did he have any contact with the FBI at all during the Hunter Biden investigation. And he said, so, you know, that suggests that there was some communication probably between him and the FBI. But other than that, look, I think this is going to be your standard political fare, and that's not good for the country.
Yeah. On the issue of Hunter Biden, critics say the gun charges, David, are really the smallest of the bunch, the most serious being accusations involving the Biden family business dealings. No charges on those as of yet. David, is public pressure, though, growing for the Attorney General and this Justice Department to take a harder tack here?
Well, I think the pressure is already there. It's been there for a while, and I think the DOJ knows it. I think what's going to be interesting to find out is these tax charges in California that could be potentially filed at some point against Hunter Biden. They'll have to go through a discovery phase at that point and a potential trial. And at that point, we might start to get some bank records and some other financial documents that could potentially implicate Joe Biden in all of this. And I think that's what we need to look out for here.
All right. David Brody, we will leave it there this evening. Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
Thanks.
Well, turning to a long-awaited meeting between the United States and Israel, seen as a bit of a snub for not being held at the White House. Today's face-to-face on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly between the president, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu comes months after distancing from the White House over concerns of a judicial overhaul in Israel and Israeli settlement expansions on the West Bank. The two world leaders discussed the threat to Israel from Iran and a potential Israel-Saudi normalization deal.
If you and I, 10 years ago, were talking about normalization with Saudi Arabia, and I think we'd look at each other like, who's been drinking what? But we're
good Irish whiskey.
Even where we have some differences, my commitment to Israel, as you know, is ironclad. I think without Israel, there's not a Jew in the world that's secure.
Netanyahu also noted during the meeting that the pair have been friends for over 40 years.
And for more on this, we're joined by Joel Rosenberg, host of the Rosenberg Report on TBN and a New York Times best-selling author based in Israel. Joel, welcome. So today's meeting between the president and prime minister was the first time the two have actually met since Bibi returned to office almost 9 months ago. What does that say, Joel, about the state of U.S.-Israeli relations?
Well, I don't know if you want the short version or the long version. The short version is, this is insane. I mean, you're talking about the president of the United States, who calls himself a Zionist and probably is the most pro-Israel person in the entire Democratic Party, refusing for 9 months to meet with the democratically elected prime minister of Israel, while Iran is getting all of Netanyahu or President Biden's attention, right? President Biden just gave $6 billion to the terrorist regime in Tehran. He's begging Iran to rejoin a deeply flawed nuclear deal. And yet this is the first time that Biden would sit down in person and meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and not even at the White House. It's wrong at every possible level, and it shows daylight between Jerusalem and Washington, which is dangerous in this particular region where I live.
Joel, why do you think that is? Do you think it's because Biden feels differently about Netanyahu and Israeli relations, or do you believe that he's just bowing to pressure from the left flank of the Democratic Party?
Well, I think it's both, actually, John. I think you've got a situation where, Bernie Sanders, the Squad, the very hard-edged anti-Israel factions, they're not dominating the actual numbers of the House or Senate Democratic caucus, right? Those numbers are not big, but the influence that they seem to have over Joe Biden is immense. Right? And why is Biden not willing, has not been willing yet to invite Netanyahu to the White House? Because he's saying that, Netanyahu is threatening democracy and sort of hanging out with bad political actors, right? And Netanyahu does have some bad political actors in his coalition, but so does Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Rashida Tlaib. But Netanyahu and Biden need to work together because we're allies facing great opportunities. The possibility of a Saudi-Israeli normalization deal, that would be huge. I've been writing about it, talking about it for years, even wrote a novel about it. It seemed like fiction at the time, but it's getting closer. So they've got to work together to make it happen. And Biden's got to get much tougher on Iran. And so far, all we're seeing is appeasement and this $6 billion gift to the terrorist regime in Tehran just this week. It's not healthy. Right. And but at least they finally met.
Joel, today's meeting comes against the backdrop of judicial reform pushed in Israel. President Biden has been very critical of that push. Where do things stand now with judicial reform?
Well, I think Netanyahu, to his credit, has sort of dialed down the temperature here in Israel, meaning he's slowed down the process. Only one of the measures of judicial reform, only one bill has actually passed. It's being reviewed by the Supreme Court right now. We'll see, how that all gets resolved. But I think Netanyahu has heard the will of the Israeli people, that even those of us who believe that reform is necessary believe he was pushing too far, too fast, and some of his plans were actually not good. But I don't think President Biden and the American White House ought to be weighing in and interfering in domestic Israeli judicial reform concerns. That really has nothing to do with the American White House. And I think, again, Biden says he loves Israel, but this is not showing love and respect and a strong alliance at a moment of great peril, but also great opportunity for Israel. It's not good, but that's where we are at the moment.
Joel, we're going to have to leave it there. I wish we had more time. We always wish we had more time with you. Joel Rosenberg, host of the Rosenberg Report. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great to see you, Joel.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
And coming up, interest rates in America, the latest decision from the Federal Reserve, when Faith Nation returns.
Well, welcome back. Today, citing stronger growth in the economy, the Federal Reserve announced a decision to hold interest rates steady while signaling one more rate hike this year is still on the horizon.
We understand the hardship that high inflation is causing, and we remain strongly committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal. Price stability is the responsibility of the Federal Reserve. Without price stability, the economy does not work for anyone.
The Fed's work to combat persistent high inflation in the economy began in March of 2022. The central bank lifted interest rates 11 consecutive times from near zero to a range of 5.25% to 5.5%, the highest in 22 years.
And here with us now is Stephen Skanke, Chief Economic Advisor at Keel Point. Steve, welcome. Good to have you with us this evening. So as John just reported, rates are at their highest level in more than 20 years. The board deciding today against another rate change. What specifically were the board members looking at?
I think that they were very much fixated at how strong the economy has performed. When you look at their summary of economic projections back in June, they were believing that the U.S. economy was going to grow at a rate of 1% in 2023, and their new projection is 2.1% for 2023, almost double, and even for 2024, which is pretty aggressive when you think about where rates are and money supply contracting. They had thought the economy would grow 1% in 2024, and now they're projecting 1.5%. I think they've just been surprised at how robust consumer spending and economic growth has been this year. They had really thought that it would trail off and that their interest rate increases would have a bigger impact than they have. And so they've been disappointed by that. What's curious about it, though, is when you look at their economic projections, their new ones, they actually believe that core PCE, personal consumption expenditure inflation, which is their preferred measure, will actually be lower by the end of the year than they had projected in June. So it's not like they don't think that their efforts are working. Their higher interest rates, the restricting the money supply, the quantitative tightening seems to be working, but it's just not having any dampening effect on the economy from their perspective. And so they're worried about that. They're really worried about an inflation surprise.
Speaking of worry, they signaled today that another rate hike might be on the horizon later this year. Do you think that another hike will kick in before year's end? And if so, how might that affect, you talked about consumer activity, Christmas shopping, the Christmas shopping season for consumers?
Well, it certainly would be a negative for Christmas shopping for consumers if they hike rates again in November or December, just as we're finishing up our Christmas shopping. I think the probability of that is actually pretty low. When you look at the so-called dot plot, 12 of the members were thinking that yes, there could be another rate increase before the end of the year. 7 were not believing that. I'd say it's pretty unlikely that we'll get another rate increase. But what's also interesting is they don't have much in terms of rate cuts in 2024, not as much as they were thinking about in June. So clearly they're concerned that their job is not done on inflation and that it's just going to be more persistent than they had hoped.
Just a few seconds left, but before the battle over the budget, there's an inter-party showdown among Republicans about budget cuts. Does the prolonged fight over funding have the potential to really throw off the gains made in this fragile economy?
Probably not a lot. It certainly creates uncertainty and disruption. But it's clear that they're struggling. You know, when they cut the deal on suspending the debt limit, they had talked about actually achieving some real cuts. And the spending for this year, well, first of all, we're going to have a $2 trillion deficit fiscal year.
Steve, I am so sorry to cut you off. We have just run out of time, but we'll have you back again soon. Steve Skanke with Kill Point, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll bring you back to finish that thought. Thanks so much, and we'll be right back after the break. And welcome back. A group of pro-life activists is facing up to 11 years in prison for blocking access to an abortion clinic right here in Washington, D.C. Back in 2020, a group of protesters stopped people from entering the clinic and created a barricade in the waiting room, chaining themselves together, preventing access to abortion procedure rooms. A federal jury just convicted 3 of those pro-life activists. 5 others have already faced similar convictions. All could spend up to 11 years behind bars once sentenced. Another protester pleaded guilty for his or her involvement in the blockade. He was sentenced to 11 months in prison.
1 in 7 Christians worldwide now face persecution. That's the stunning headline out of a new report from World Relief and Open Doors USA. According to the new closed-door report on the rise of persecuted Christians around the world, 360 million Christians face high levels of persecution and discrimination. More than 5,500 Christians were killed for their faith this year alone, while many others were arrested and imprisoned around the world. Noting a drop in refugees allowed to settle in the U.S., the report calls on the U.S. leaders to, quote, stand by our nation's commitment to religious freedom and to become a safe haven for persecuted religious communities. And we'll be right back after this. Finally tonight, a mother-daughter duo is winning over people's hearts after completing a marathon together earlier this month.
Courtney Ritz trained for months with her family, cheering her on, but she wasn't quite prepared for the moment that her 10-year-old daughter ran out to help her. With 2 miles left to go, Courtney told her family that she was struggling on the course. Her daughter, Avery, jumped into the race from the sidelines, grabbing her mother's hand and running with her to the finish line.
It's one of those moments as a parent that I realized, wait, they can support us too. They can be there for us.
A precious moment, even without the first place win. It is safe, I'm sure, for all of us to call that moment a win.
That's beautiful. I love seeing that.
Avery, a good, supportive daughter, and way to go, Mom.
Yeah, she might have some marathons of her own in the future.
That's right, 26.2 miles. Thanks so much for watching.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.